Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this spoiler-free movie review video. Um, I'm going to go ahead and give you my thoughts. I just saw the new Insidious movie, The Red Door, at the theater, so I'm going to go ahead and do a spoiler-free review based on my thoughts and sort of the what the movie's about without giving any spoilers away. If you follow my channel, you know that I reviewed the first four Insidious movies last month and ranked them. Those videos are up on my channel if you want to check them out. And in part, I did that to prepare for this new movie that I knew was coming out in early July here. So now I've seen all five Insidious movies that exist. So let's just go ahead and get into it as far as this one goes. Obviously, Insidious The Red Door is a 2023 American supernatural horror film that's directed by Patrick Wilson, who also stars in this movie. It's his directorial debut. The movie is also from a screenplay by Scott Teems, based on a story by Lee Winnell and Teems. It is a direct sequel to Insidious Chapter 2 from 2013 and the fifth installment in the Insidious franchise. Original director James Wan serves as a producer, as does Jason Blum through his Blumhouse Productions banner. Ty Simpkins, Wilson, Andrew Astor, Rose Byrne, and Lynn Shay reprise their roles from the previous films. Chaim Abbas and Sinclair Daniel also joined the cast. The cast for this film, you have Ty Simpkins as Dalton Lambert, Patrick Wilson as Josh Lambert, Rose Byrne as Renee Lambert, Sinclair Daniel as Chris Winslow, Chaim Abbas as Professor Armageddon, Andrew Astor as Foster Lambert, Juliana Davies as Callie Lambert, Steve Coulter as Carl, Peter Dager as Nick the Dick, Justin Sturgis as Alec Anderson, Joseph Bishari as the lipstick demon, Lee Winnell as Specs, Angus Sampson as Tucker, and Lynn Shay as Elise Rainier. So yeah, that's sort of the informational part of this. I'm not going to get into it like I would a regular review because for one thing, they don't have that much of a synopsis out there online. So I really don't need to since I just saw the movie anyway. I wouldn't say my expectations were overly high for this movie, but having coming off just watching the first four movies, including the last three, which that was the first time watch for me last month. I'd seen the original Insidious a couple times before, but I'd love to jump on here and tell you that this movie was fantastic, amazing. It's one of the best in the franchise. But unfortunately, I can't do that because I don't like lying. Um, yeah, this movie is kind of a mixed bag at best. Um, I think it's the weakest Insidious movie at worst. Now, I'm not making that declaration yet. Um, I'm probably going to need to watch it again and get some time on it before I can definitively say where I would rank it. But it's definitely got to be on the lower end of the list. In no way is it on the same level as the first two, and I would argue the first three Insidious movie, the chapter movies. It's kind of there with the Last Key, but I have to say initially, I think I like the Last Key even a little bit more than this movie. Again, that's just my opinion. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the things that I liked about Insidious: The Red Door. And right off the bat, you got to talk about, like with a lot of these movies, you got to talk about the performances, which I think they're really solid in all these Insidious movies. That's something that you can say. And in this movie, I think Patrick Wilson and Ty Simpkins really, of course, they carry the movie. Those two characters have to carry the movie in a lot of ways. And I think Ty Simpkins and Patrick Wilson, it's amazing how easily they step back into these characters and back into this world almost seamlessly after a decade. Especially Ty Simpkins, who was basically a 10 or 11-year-old kid when Insidious Chapter 2 came out. I thought he was really good in the movie. He played the character the way he needed to play it the first three-fourths of the movie, and then kind of had a bit of an arc at the end. And I thought he did well with that. And then Patrick Wilson, what can you say? This guy, I've never seen him have a bad performance in any movie or anything he's ever been in. The three Insidious movies that he's fantastic. Obviously, the Conjuring movies, I could go on and on, but he's really outstanding in this movie as well. As good, if not better, than he's been in any of the Insidious movies. So, yeah, that really stands out to me right from the jump that those two that had to carry the movie because of the way it was written, they really did a good job performing. It was good to see the family back again. it was cool that it's the same actors and actresses, even the kids, Andrew Astor, who plays Foster, and Ty Simpkins, who played Dalton. They played them as kids in the first two movies. They're back as teenagers slash young adults in this movie, which is cool. Obviously, Rose Byrne is back as Renee, and then Patrick Wilson. So you get the gist of the family. The only one I'm not sure about, Juliana Davies. I'm not sure if that's Callie Lambert. I don't know that she was the well, she was basically a baby in the first couple of movies, so it's probably not the same actress. But otherwise the family's intact, and it's we kind of pick up with them at a different point in their lives. It's 9 years after the events of the end of the second movie. They kind of remind us what happens at the end of the second movie. Um, and we pick up with the family at a very different place, and it's a very interesting place, and it kind of makes some sense if you think about it with how the second movie ended, chapter two. um I'm not going to tell you exactly what those changes are, but basically the film starts at a funeral that the whole family's attending. I'm not going to tell you who it's for, spoiler free. um but it's a character that you'll know from previous movies. And that's kind of how we're introduced to the family, and we kind of get up to date with where they've been, what they've been doing, and all those type of things. Um, and then it kind of goes from there. You know, Josh takes Dalton to college. He's starting college now. He's a big like art major, basically at a liberal arts college. Um, so he drives them there, and there's a lot of tension between Dalton and Josh. Maybe for obvious reasons, if you've seen the first couple of movies, maybe not so obvious going into this one, but it kind of makes sense. Um, and again, Patrick Wilson directs this movie. This is his directorial debut, as it was Lee Winnell's directorial debut with Chapter 3 of this franchise. And I have to say, I think Patrick Wilson does a pretty good job overall, especially as it relates to more of the family melodrama dynamics and emotional pull having to do with the family. I think he does a good job stepping in as the director, as well as being like the main actor and main character in this movie. He's got a lot to that he stretched on in this movie, and he does a really fabulous job, especially acting, but even directing. I thought he was good. So yeah, the movie opens up that way, and there's a lot of tension between Dalton and Josh, and especially as Josh leaves college after dropping him off, and then they come together at the end of the movie again for probably for obvious reasons, which I'm not going to give those away. But yeah, going on to some of my other likes, we get some cool cameos from some pretty popular characters in this franchise. Um, Specs and Tucker, as well as Elise Rainier. They're not obviously big chunks of this movie the way that they were in um, chapters 3 and The Last Key for sure, but even the first couple movies. And in the case of Elise Rainier, it's kind of obvious, but she is in this movie, Lynn Shay, and for the little bit she has to do, she's as good as always, and stepping back into this role. Um, and yeah, so I thought we also get a brief cameo from Steve Coulter as Carl, who was in chapter 2. So there's just a lot of nice connectivity, a lot of continuity for being 10 years after the second movie that focused on this family last, where chapters 3 and The Last Key, of course, are prequels. If you go in chronological order, this is the third movie. It goes 1, 2, 5, or the last, or the Red Door, and then, or I'm sorry, 3, 4, 1, 2, 5. Um, but yeah, as far as other things I liked, I thought there was some pretty good camera work, some pretty good cinematography here, a couple of decent build up scares. Not as many as I might have liked, which I'll get into here in a little bit. Um, but there's some good lighting that goes on here and stuff. Like I said, a credit to Patrick Wilson, good performances. I want to make sure I don't miss anything else that I liked about the movie. And I think it leaves. I think at the end it does sort of leave this Lambert family in a pretty good place, a pretty satisfying place for those of us that have an emotional connection with this family from the very first Insidious movie. Although you could argue the end of the second movie kind of could have done that too. But I think it's interesting to explore them a decade later I think it says 9 years at the beginning of this movie, so almost a decade later. So I do think the movie does have some weight in that regard, as far as exploring these characters in this family again and what a different place they're in. So it's really a much nicer wrap up at the end of this movie. Not everything's perfect, but there's it's just a nice, satisfying conclusion to this family. So those are my pros for the movie. I mean, it's not an awful movie by any stretch of the imagination. Getting into the things that didn't work for me, that I didn't like as much, it has a lot to do with the horror part of the movie, the Insidious type of movie that you're expecting. And that's where this movie comes up quite a bit short for me. And I think in the franchise, it's the only movie that comes up quite a bit short. Even The Last Key, I felt, still had a lot of those Insidious themes and feels to them. And what I mean by that, a lot of it is the buildup of tension, the buildup of before the scare. I mean, I thought somebody quoted James Wan as saying anybody can do a jump scare or a scare, but it's that tension of building it up and finally letting the audience off the hook that James Wan is so good at, and the series has been so good at. And other than maybe one or two scenes in this movie, I just don't feel like this movie had as much of that. It was a lot more. It was a lot more just flat up jump scares. Still not false scares. The jump scares are related to the story. They're real scares, but they are kind of just jump scares instead of that build up that we've come to expect in these Insidious movies. So that was kind of disappointing. I was kind of going to midway through the movie, kind of waiting for the that big iconic scene that you get in the first. There's at least one, it feels like, in all the other movies, and in this movie there really isn't one. The closest I can get to is a scene having to do with a tube that Josh is in, and that's as much as I'm going to give away. If you've seen the trailer, you probably know what I'm talking about. But again, that doesn't work entirely because I give it away in the trailer, which is another problem I have with this movie. Not just this movie, but movies in general nowadays. Why do they show so much in the trailers? I mean, it's a lot of these movies you could basically watch the trailer and know what the movie's about. I'm not saying this movie's entirely like that, but that's more of just a general complaint that I have, and they do show too much in the trailer for this movie, like all the creepy scenes. And unfortunately, the reason for that is because there's just not that many creepy scenes in this movie, comparatively speaking. So that's a con. Also, we get a lot of time with Dalton at college, which is fine. I understand they have to have a new setting and move on as his family has aged and moved on. But the problem is you get a lot of that college frat party atmosphere and a lot of that teeny bopper shit going on here for at least a good chunk of the movie, at least like 20 to 25 minutes of this movie. You know, you meet a frat guy or like the lead of a frat or something, and then him and this other character that we're introduced to, his roommate for one night anyway, and his friend at college end up going to it because they think it'd be fun to sort of trash it and stuff. And I don't know, just didn't help it feel like an Insidious movie to me. So that really didn't work for me. But like I said, my biggest problem is the horror aspects of it, the Insidious expectation that's there. It just doesn't feel like an Insidious movie. The tone of this movie feels off. I think they have a lot of good ideas, but I think they have too many ideas that they try to sandwich into this movie. When you're talking about the relationship, the strain between Dalton and Josh's relationship, the strain with the family, Josh trying to figure out some mental things that might be going on with him, a past parent that's going on with them, and then a familiar villain as well, and they all try to pack it into this movie, and it just doesn't really work. There's just too much here, and yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't work as well as the other four movies. It really doesn't for me. Um, I'm trying to think. There was one other con that I wanted to get to. The end of the movie is pretty good. The last 15 or 20 minutes, you do get the climax of the movie as you would expect. And we get back into the further, which is cool. The further does look good again after a couple of movies of lower budget. It feels like they did a little bit more with this one, especially the lighting and sort of the creepiness. Although we still don't get a lot of other ghosts or demons in this movie like we did in the first movie or even the second movie. So from that standpoint, maybe the budget isn't as high. But the further is pretty cool. The resolution at the end is pretty decent. And as I said, where this family's left off is pretty decent. I'm gonna have to watch this movie again, of course. It's not an it's a good movie. It's a decent movie. I just don't think it's as good in the Insidious franchise as the other movies, and that's just coming off of a first time recent watch of this movie. It's just my opinion. There's just a lot of things that don't work here, especially on the horror side. But I can say that the family dynamic works well here. The drama works well. The performances work well. The cinematography and camera work. Exploring the further again works well. It's cool to get some. It's cool to see some of the main characters from this franchise make sort of cameos or short appearances. Oh, I know what the other con was, and I've this has been a con in all of the movies, but this time I can't pick on the same two for it. Once again, they try to shove the humor down our throats. This time, instead of doing it with Specs and Tucker, although there's like 3 seconds or so that Tucker tries to be Tucker-esque, basically, in this franchise, which wasn't really funny anyway. But mainly, the humor tries to come from this new character. What's her name? Chris Winslow, played by Sinclair Daniel. She tries to be the comic relief for the most part in this movie, and that didn't really work for me either. I really didn't care for that character all that much, if I'm being honest about it. She's not the worst character I've ever seen in a horror movie or a movie period, but she's just kind of there to be sort of Dalton's sidekick and to sort of have Dalton give exposition to her and tell the audience what we already know. That's one thing about this movie too. As an audience, we know more than Dalton and Josh know for most of the movie until the end, which is kind of a weird dynamic, and I'm not sure that entirely works either. But overall, there's a lot of good here, guys, but there's a lot that comes up short as well. That's just my feeling on it, and I'm going to give this movie. I'm going back and forth between a 6.5 and a 7. I think I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10, at least for a first time watch. Maybe that'll change. Hopefully, it'll only go up upon rewatch. But for right now, I have to say I was kind of disappointed in it. It just it didn't do what the other Insidious movies did. It didn't get under my skin. It didn't have the build up other than two scenes, the tube that I talked about that you show in the trailer, and then there's also another scene where Josh is putting up pictures or like he's trying to do a mental exercise on a window that leads to a pretty decent jump scare there. There are jump scares in this movie, and I guess if you like jump scares, a couple of them are pretty good, but I'm not the biggest jump scare person unless it has good build up like the earlier movies do in this franchise. So 6.5 out of 10 is my rating after a one-time watch for Insidious the Red Door. I would definitely recommend that you go check it out and decide for yourself if it works for you. It obviously just came out today on Friday, July 7th. Check it out. Especially if you like the other Insidious movies. Maybe you'll have a different opinion than I do. I hope you do. I hope I have a better opinion after watching it again. But I'll probably catch it at the theater in a week or two after things calm down. But that's just my initial spoiler free review for Insidious the Red Door. Sorry. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming review videos or videos. Period. Please subscribe to my channel as well so you don't miss any of my great horror content. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope I gave you some positives and negatives. It'll get you to go watch this movie and decide for yourself. But I hope everybody's doing well and stay scared. Bye.